My name is Bupha. I'm 72 years old, and I want to tell you something that took me most of my life to understand. Something so close to me, so intimate, so woven into the most private hours of my existence that I never once thought to examine it. I spent decades looking outward for the reasons why prosperity felt just out of reach. I looked at my work, my habits, my choices, my relationships. I looked everywhere except the one place where I was most vulnerable, most open, most completely surrendered to whatever surrounded me. I looked everywhere except the way I slept. I know how that sounds. I know you might be thinking that sleep is just sleep, that the body rests, the mind quiets, and nothing of real consequence happens in those hours, except the simple biological necessity of recovery. I thought the same thing for most of my life. And while I was thinking that, while I was dismissing those 8 hours as passive and irrelevant to my financial reality, those hours were quietly, consistently shaping that reality in ways I could not see. Let me tell you where this understanding began for me. I was in my early 50s, a time when I thought I had already learned most of what life had to teach me. I was wrong about that, as I have been wrong about many things that later turned out to be gifts. My finances had been in a strange kind of stagnation for years, not desperate, not catastrophic, but stuck. Like water that had stopped flowing. Enough to survive, not enough to breathe freely. And no matter what I adjusted in my waking life, the stagnation remained. I remember one morning waking up and lying in bed for a moment before the day began, which was unusual for me because I was always in a hurry to start moving. But that particular morning, I stayed still for a few minutes, and I looked at the room around me from that horizontal position, from the exact perspective I had every night as I fell asleep and every morning as I woke. And something about seeing the room from that angle, slowly, without the rush of the day already pulling at me, made me notice things I had never noticed before. The first thing I noticed was what I was facing as I slept. My body was positioned so that my feet pointed directly toward the door of the room. I had slept that way for years without a second thought. But in that quiet morning moment, something about it felt wrong in a way I couldn't immediately name. A vulnerability, an exposure, as if my most open, most unguarded self was pointed directly at the entrance to the space with nothing solid behind me. The second thing I noticed was what surrounded me. On my bedside table, there were unpaid bills I had brought into the bedroom to review and then forgotten. There was a photograph of a period in my life I would rather have left in the past. There was a notebook full of worries I had written down before sleep, thinking I was being practical by capturing my concerns so I wouldn't forget them. not understanding that I was feeding those concerns to my subconscious at precisely the moment when it was most receptive. The third thing I noticed was the feeling in the room itself. It felt heavy, not physically uncomfortable, but energetically heavy, like a room that had absorbed too many difficult nights and never been given the chance to release them. I lay there looking at all of this, and I thought, this is where I begin every single day. This is the environment that my sleeping mind inhabits for 8 hours every night. This is the space that shapes the quality of my rest, and the quality of my rest shapes the quality of every decision I make, every conversation I have, every opportunity I see or miss in the hours I am awake. And I had never paid it any real attention. That morning I made a decision, not a dramatic decision, not a complete overhaul of my life, a quiet, deliberate decision to understand the relationship between the way I slept and the life I was living. And what I discovered over the months that followed changed not only my nights, but my days, my finances, and my sense of what was possible. Let me share with you what I learned, honestly and specifically, because you deserve clarity and not just inspiration. The first thing I changed was the position of my bed. In many ancient traditions, and increasingly in modern understanding of how the body and mind respond to their environment during sleep, the position of your sleeping body relative to the room matters deeply. Sleeping with your feet pointing directly toward the door creates a subtle but persistent sense of exposure during the hours when you are most vulnerable. The sleeping mind, which is working hard to restore and recalibrate your entire system, registers this exposure as a low-level threat, and a mind that is managing low-level threat all night is not a mind that is freely processing, freely creating, freely preparing you for abundance. I repositioned my bed so that my head rested against a solid wall, giving my sleeping self a sense of support and groundedness that I had not realized was missing. And with a clear view of the door from that position, not aligned with it, but able to see it, the difference in the quality of my sleep was immediate and undeniable. The second thing I changed was what I allowed into the bedroom in the hours before sleep. I removed the unpaid bills. Not because ignoring financial reality is wise, but because reviewing financial anxiety in the last moments before sleep is one of the most effective ways to ensure that your subconscious spends the night deepening the grooves of that anxiety. There is a time and a place for facing financial challenges, and it is not the final hour before you surrender consciousness. I began instead to bring something different into those last minutes. Not fantasy, not denial, but genuine gratitude. Small, real, specific things from the day that had carried the feeling of sufficiency. A meal that was satisfying, a moment of connection with someone I loved, a task completed well. These small acknowledgments shifted the emotional tone that I carried into sleep. and the emotional tone you carry into sleep is the instruction your subconscious receives for the entire night. The third thing I changed was the physical environment of the room itself. I removed the photograph that connected me to a painful chapter. I cleared the surfaces of things that carried the energy of incompletion and unresolved tension. I introduced a small plant, something living, something that breathed alongside me in those hours. I opened the window each morning to allow the night's accumulated energy to move out and fresh air to move in. These were not expensive changes, they were not complicated, but each one was made with a clear understanding of why I was making it. And that understanding, that intentionality, was what gave each change its power. The fourth thing I changed was the thoughts I allowed to accompany me into sleep. This was the most difficult change, because thoughts are not as easily rearranged as furniture. But I began a practice that I have continued to this day. In the last few minutes before sleep, I would consciously release the worries of the day. Not pretend they didn't exist, not tell myself everything was fine when it wasn't, but consciously, deliberately choose not to carry them into the night. I would say to myself, quietly and honestly, these concerns will still be here tomorrow. My sleeping mind cannot solve them, but it can restore me so that my waking mind is better equipped to face them. That single shift in relationship with my nighttime thoughts changed the quality of my mornings profoundly. I began waking with a clarity and a quiet readiness that I had not felt in years. And clarity, I discovered, is one of the most underestimated components of financial prosperity. Because most of the opportunities that pass people by do not pass them by because they weren't available. They pass by because the person was too exhausted, too clouded, too submerged in anxiety to recognize them. When I slept better, I thought more clearly. When I thought more clearly, I made better decisions. When I made better decisions, the direction of my financial life began, slowly but unmistakably, to change. There is something else I want to tell you, something that goes a little deeper than the practical adjustments I have described. The way you sleep is a reflection of your relationship with surrender, with trust, with the willingness to release control for a few hours and allow something greater than your own effort to work on your behalf. Many of us, especially those of us who have lived through financial difficulty, develop a relationship with control that feels like survival, but is actually a form of exhaustion. We believe that if we just stay alert enough, plan carefully enough, worry sufficiently, we will somehow prevent the worst from happening. And so we carry that vigilance into sleep. We lie down, but we don't truly let go. We close our eyes, but some part of us remains on guard, braced, watchful, afraid of what relaxing might cost us. And that part, the part that cannot rest, the part that grips even in sleep, is the part that is most in need of the healing that genuine sleep can provide. but it cannot receive that healing precisely because it will not release enough to allow it. I lived in that grip for decades, and I did not know it until I finally felt what it was like to release it. Learning to sleep in a way that supports prosperity is, at its deepest level, learning to trust. Learning to believe that the world will not fall apart in the hours when you are not watching it. Learning to receive the restoration that your body and mind are designed to experience when you truly let go. And from that restoration comes the clarity, the energy, the open-hearted readiness that allows abundance to enter. Prosperity is not only built during the hours you are working, it is built during the hours you are resting, if you rest well. If you rest in a space that supports you, in a position that feels safe, in an emotional state that is open rather than braced, your sleeping hours become some of the most productive hours of your life, not in the doing sense, but in the becoming sense. You wake as someone slightly more capable of receiving what you are calling in, and that becoming night after night accumulates. I want to give you something specific to do tonight, because I believe that the most powerful teachings are the ones that move from understanding into action. Tonight, before you get into bed, stand in your bedroom doorway and look at the room with fresh eyes. Look at it as the environment that will hold your most open, most vulnerable, most receptive self for the next several hours. And ask yourself honestly, does this space support me? Does it feel safe? Does it feel clear? Does it carry the energy of rest and renewal? Or does it carry the energy of unresolved tension and accumulated heaviness? Then make one change, just one. It doesn't need to be the perfect change or the most important one. It just needs to be a real one, made with genuine intention and a clear understanding of why you are making it. Remove one object that doesn't belong in the space where you sleep. Reposition one thing that hasn't felt right. Clear one surface that has been accumulating the weight of unresolved things. Or simply, before you close your eyes tonight, spend 3 genuine minutes in gratitude for what was sufficient today. One change made with presence and intention is worth infinitely more than a complete renovation made with distraction and doubt. If these reflections have reached something real in you, if they have touched a place of recognition that goes beyond the surface of the words, I want to invite you to stay in this space. Come back whenever the noise of daily life has drowned out the quieter truths. Subscribe and walk with me, because I have so much more to share, gathered from a life that has known difficulty and found its way through, slowly and honestly, and with great respect for the small, powerful things. Tonight, sleep differently, not with grand ambition or anxious hope, but with the quiet, dignified intention of someone who has decided that the hours of rest are as sacred and as important as the hours of effort, because they are. They always have been. And the prosperity that you are building in your waking hours needs somewhere to land when the day is over. Give it a space that is worthy of it. Give yourself a night that is worthy of you.